today I'm going to be showing you how to make these lovely little candle lanterns. Now I'm going to be making mine for my doll's house study, and I'm going to stand them in the fireplace in there, which I think will look really nice. So I want to begin by making the candles. So let's get the polymer clay out. Okay, so for the candles I'm going to be using a translucent polymer clay, and this is a Fimo Effect clay, and once it's baked it gets that translucent appearance. At the moment it just looks white, but when you bake it, it gets that lovely candle-like appearance. So I've just cut myself off a small piece, and I'm going to warm this up in my fingers and then roll that into a ball. So I've got here a ball which is about 15 centimetres round, or 5/8 of an inch, and I'm working on a ceramic tile, and these are really good for working with clay on because it gives you that nice smooth surface and your clay won't stick to them. I've also got my single-edged blade here for cutting the clay, and I've also got my white cotton and sewing needle to create the wicks. Now if you want your candles to look as though they've been burnt, then you can use a black thread. So what I'm going to do now is roll this out into a sausage, and obviously candles come in all shapes and sizes, so it's up to you what sort of size you do. You might want to just put one inside your lantern, or they look quite nice as well with a little cluster of 3 in them. So if you're going to do 3, do them in different sizes, height-wise, which looks really nice. But obviously it's your lantern, so you can do it how you like. So I'm rolling this to about 5mm in diameter. And I'm not going to measure it with a rule, so I'm just sort of doing that by eye. And you want to try and get it as even as you can all the way along. So I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to have just 1 or 3 candles in my lantern, so I'm going to make more than I need, and I can always use them in other projects. So I'm just cutting off the end there. Let me just move the camera back so you can see what I'm doing. So I've just cut off the end, so I've got a nice square end. And then I'm going to do 3 smaller candles, so probably about 6mm high. And you can either use a rule to measure those, or just do it by eye as I'm doing. I'm going to measure them against each other. But if you use a rule, try one of those clear acrylic rules. And then when you've cut them, you'll sort of tend to squash them a little bit, so you can just roll them up again. And then I'm going to go slightly taller, so probably about 10mm, and I'm going to do 3 of those. And then I'm going to do 3 12mm, or maybe 14, just to give it more of a sort of height difference. So then I'll go up like that. Like that. And then I've got a little bit left over, so I'll just cut a few more from that. And again, these won't go to waste, because I can always use them in other projects. We'll have a couple of small ones as well. So the battery on the camera has just started flashing, so I'll change that and then we'll come back and add the wicks. So thread your cotton onto a thin sewing needle, and then we're just going to thread them through the centre of the candle, like that, and out the other end. And the end that you go in on should be the top of your candle, because then you know you're right in the centre. So just hold on to the wick, and you can leave it longer than it needs to be, because then we can trim it off, and then trim it off at the bottom, again just leaving a little bit of a tail there, which we can then stick down at the bottom of the candle. And again, if you misshape as you're threading the cotton in, just roll them up again to make them into more of a cylinder. And then just going to pop that over there. And the beauty of these ceramic tiles as well is that you can actually put these straight into the oven. so I'll actually be baking them on this tile as well. So put wicks through all of your candles. And the other thing you can do is use either another little tiny bit of polymer clay to colour the translucent, or you can use chalk pastels and just put a tiny bit on a bit of paper or even in the palm of your hand and then colour the clay that way to get either that lovely sort of beeswax colour or different colours. But for this project I'm just sticking with the translucent ones, just the normal sort of pale cream colour. And I actually quite like them when they look a little bit out of shape rather than the sort of pristine cylinder. So don't worry if, you know, they're not exact. Handmade things aren't always perfect. Okay, so my candles are now ready to bake, and do read the instructions on the packet of your clay because all different makes will have different timings. Now with the Fimo clay it says to do it at 110 Celsius or 230 Fahrenheit for half an hour, but I find when you're only doing a few smaller bits you really don't need that long, so I normally check them after about 10 to 12 minutes. Okay, so let's go and get the oven on. So the candles are now baked and I'm really pleased with those, and I baked those for about 10 minutes, and as you can see that gives that really nice sort of candle wax colour. So what I want to do now is just trim those wicks down to a more reasonable length, and now we can make a start on our lanterns. Okay, so I've decided I'm going to have 3 lanterns, small, medium and large, and I'm going to have 1 candle in each lantern. So I've just chosen a small, medium and large candle there as well. And then I've made up the small lantern just as a little practice piece really. Really pleased with that. And then for the medium and large I've just gone up in 3mm or 1/8 of an inch increments. So it will be 3mm wider and 3mm taller as we go up. Now I did toy with the idea of having acetate in there, but it made it a little bit fiddly because you need a little ridge on the inside of these corners to actually glue the acetate to. But if you did want to put acetate in, then just make yourself a little corner. So rather than using a strip, use 2 pieces of wood which you'd sort of glue into a V shape, I suppose. That's not right, is it? Like an L shape, like a little corner square, and then you've got like a little ridge on the inside to glue your acetate to. But also if you do that you wouldn't be able to glue it together before paint, as you'd need to paint it and then attach the acetate. So it would be tricky, but if you wanted to do it that way and make a more sort of elaborate design then you could do that. But I've tried to keep it simple as well. I've attached the little hoop at the top there and I'm going to paint over that as well. So I've made up the smaller one, but they're all put together in exactly the same way. It's just the pieces that are sized differently. So I've got my large one there, medium there, and when you're cutting I advise you to put them in this sort of order. So you've got your, let me just see what I've called them, small base and top, large base and top, and then those 3 shaped top, small, medium and large, put them in a little pile like that as you cut them. And then you've got your 4 corners, and that just makes it easier to identify the pieces. So we're going to begin by beveling each of the small and large base and top pieces. So with your sandpaper flat on your work surface, hold the piece at a 45-degree angle and sweep it towards you, keeping it at that angle. And because it's such a small piece as well, I'm supporting it as much as I can with my finger there. So I've got my finger almost touching the sandpaper. And I find that if you hold it further up and then bevel, your bevel can become uneven, so you can have more of a bevel on one side. So if you support it as low down as you can, then you're more likely to get an even bevel. But just do about 5 or 6 sweeps on there, and then we'll finish it off in our hand to get it really nice and even. Just work your way around like that. And then grab a piece of finer grade sandpaper and just sweep it along each bevel, and that really tidies it up. Like that. So you want to do those with both of the smaller base and top pieces and the large base and top pieces, and I'm going to work on both the medium and the large lantern at the same time. So we're now going to join the top and bottom pieces together. So the smaller piece will sit centrally on top of the larger piece like that. So apply glue to the bottom of the smaller piece. And then pop that down right in the centre. And I also like to make sure that the grain of the wood is running in the same direction, but it doesn't really matter. It's just one of those little things that I always do. It just doesn't feel right to glue them, you know, with the grains in opposite directions. I'm probably just a bit weird that way. So remove any excess glue. And as you saw then, I just sort of slid it back into the centre, so you've got a little bit of time just to make sure that you're really happy with the position in there. Give it a press, and I'm going to use one of these larger clamps to hold those together, like that. So pop that piece to one side, and then do the same with the other piece, or other pieces. And these make up our top and bottom of the lantern. Once you've allowed enough time for those to dry, we're ready to attach our corners. So you want to make sure that your pieces of strip are all exactly the same length. So just lay them all alongside each other, and if you need to do any trimming, then do so before we glue them into place. Otherwise the top piece is going to be wonky. And then you just want to dab a little bit of glue onto one end. And then these are going to sit right in that corner, just inside the bevel. So press that into place. Like that. And then just pop one into each corner. Give it a good press. Position them as straight up as you can, but don't worry if they're sort of trying to fall away, because when we put the top bit on, we'll square it all up. Once you've allowed that to dry off for a bit, just put a little bit of glue onto the top of each strip. And then we're actually going to turn this over and place it onto the top piece. I just find it's easier to position the strip that way. Just really carefully pick it up, and this is why you need to let it to dry off first, and then position it so that you're getting those strips right into those corners again, so right into the beveled edges. And you could just use a cocktail stick just to sort of very gently tap them into place to make sure that they're right at the edge of the bevels there. And if you're finding any wonkiness here, that's because your strips may be just slightly out. You might have one or two that are longer than the others. But it should just go together nicely like that, and then you can just very gently press it down and just hold on to it for a bit, just until the glue begins to take, probably about 30 seconds or so. So whilst that's drying, we're going to bevel the shaped top pieces, and exactly the same thing again, we're going to bevel them on all sides. So again, just hold it against your sandpaper, supporting it as much as you can. And you want to do that on all edges of each piece. We're now ready to glue these pieces together. So begin by applying glue to the bottom of the smaller piece. Attach that to the medium and then the medium to the large. So again, I've got the grain running in the same direction. I'm just placing that right in the centre of the bevels there. Pick it up and have a look, make sure you're happy with the positioning. Get rid of any excess glue and then apply glue to the back of the next piece. Again, get rid of that excess glue. And I'm going to grab one of those large clamps again. Just clamp those together and that piece can be left to dry. So my largest lantern top has now dried, so I'm ready to drill the hole for the little ring pull. So I'm using my largest mini drill bit and I've made a pencil mark there right in the centre. And you can drill all the way through here because obviously the bottom of the hole will be covered or will be glued to the top of the lantern, so don't worry about there being a hole showing. And then give it a bit of a jiggle, just because I'm using a slightly smaller drill bit than the little stem of the pull. So I like to just give it a jiggle. You've probably seen me do this with drawer holes as well. So then try the little stem into place. And that's tight, but I will be able to push that in. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of glue in there. Use the pointier end. And that's really just to secure it into place. And these little ring pulls are available in my Etsy shop. So press that into place, making sure that it's sitting flat against the top piece. Like I say, I'll be painting over these when I paint the lanterns. The paint might not adhere to them, so the gold will show through, but I quite like the look of that. That gives it that sort of rusticy look. So I'm just going to hold that down like that and give it a final push just to make sure it's all the way in. Like that. I really like those little pulls. And then that can be glued to the top of the lantern. So again, apply the glue to the bottom of the top piece. And then it's going to sit directly in the centre of that top, and there's just probably about 1/2 millimetre border, if that, around the pieces. So just line that up like that. Check all the way round, make sure that it's sitting nicely centralised there. And just really carefully press it into place. And if you wanted your sort of top piece to be taller on the larger lanterns, you could just add another square or two. Just go a couple of millimetres smaller on each one. And you can make a taller top. We can then go back to our medium one. The lanterns are now ready for paint. I'm going to do mine in cream to stand out against the black insert in my study fireplace, but they look really nice in black or gold, and I've even seen some really nice modern ones in silver. So I gave the lanterns one coat of paint and once that had completely dried I gave them all a gentle sand. And as I said, I've painted over the little brass hoop, and that will sort of start to wear off and you can see the gold coming through there, but I really like that look. So I'm really pleased with those. So what we need to do now is glue our candles into place. So use some tweezers, and you may just need to get hold of it with the wick rather than the actual candle, especially for the smaller lantern, otherwise you're not going to get it in there anyway. So just put a little tiny bit of glue on the bottom of the candle. And with these polymer clay candles as well, just make sure that they're standing upright, and if not you could just trim a little tiny bit off the bottom just using your craft knife. So a little bit of glue on there. Pop that into the centre of the lantern and give it a press down. And I was toying with the idea of having 2 or 3 in the larger one, but I think I'm just going to stick with 1 in each. That's that one. They look really good. So the final thing to do is go and put them in place in the doll's house. And there they are in place. Now I want to have some chopped logs in there as well, so I'll have those in a little stack on one side. So I might just slightly change the position of those. I may even have the large or the medium one somewhere else in the room if I can't fit them all in, but I'm really pleased with those. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll be back again soon with another Doll's House Diary. So until then, take care. Bye!